We often talk about the line between fiction and reality. Usually that line is thick, it's visible. We watch horror movies to feel scared, and then we turn off the TV, lock the doors, and go to sleep safe in the knowledge that it was just a script. But in September 2006, in the quiet town of Pocatello, Idaho, 2 high school students decided to erase that line. They didn't just want to watch a horror movie. They wanted to direct one. They wrote a script. They bought the costumes. They scouted the location, and they cast an unsuspecting classmate, Cassie Jo Stoddart, as their victim. The most terrifying part of this story isn't just the crime itself. It's that they filmed the entire planning phase. They documented their descent into evil, believing they would become legends. But in the end, they only rendered themselves guilty. To understand the why, we have to look at the who. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik. On the surface, they were just 2 ordinary juniors at Pocatello High School. Brian had moved to Idaho from Utah and was trying hard to fit in. He met Torey, a student who seemed to share his specific interests. And by interests, I mean an obsession with cinema. But they weren't watching comedies. They were obsessed with horror, specifically the movie Scream. If you've seen it, you know the plot. 2 teenagers kill their classmates for the thrill of it. Brian and Torey didn't just fanboy over the film, they idolized the killers. They started spending every waking moment together. They made their own amateur films at school. But slowly, the content of those films shifted. They stopped filming skits and started filming manifestos. In the days leading up to the murder, they recorded what are now known as the basement tapes, a chilling nod to the Columbine shooters, whom they also admired. We're going to go down in history. We're going to be just like Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. They're our idols. This wasn't just teenage angst. This was rehearsal. They spoke about the plan. They talked about hunting. They talked about death counts. And they spoke about it with the excitement of directors planning a blockbuster opening weekend. The location for their movie was perfect. Too perfect. Cassie Jo Stoddart was house sitting for her aunt and uncle at their home on Whispering Cliffs Drive. The house was beautiful, modern, and isolated. It sat on a hill, separated from the neighbors. On Friday, September 22nd, Cassie invited her boyfriend, Matt, over to hang out. And because she was kind, she also allowed Brian and Torey to come over earlier in the evening. The 4 of them watched a movie. Nothing seemed wrong. Brian and Torey acted like normal friends. But around 9:30 p.m., the 2 boys stood up and said they were leaving. They said they wanted to go to the local movie theater to catch a flick. They walked out the front door. They got into their car. But they didn't go to the movies. They drove down the street, parked, and changed. Dark clothes, gloves, and painted white masks. They grabbed their weapons and their camera. They crept back to the house, but they didn't break in immediately. They waited. They watched. Just like the title of the movie they were emulating. They were the directors, and Cassie was unknowingly playing her final scene. While Cassie and her boyfriend Matt were watching TV, Brian and Torey found the circuit breaker outside. The house plunged into darkness. This wasn't an accident. This was psychological warfare. They wanted to terrorize them first. Cassie and Matt were spooked, but thinking it was just a temporary outage or a prank, they didn't call the police. The power eventually came back on. Around 10:30 p.m., Matt's mom came to pick him up. He offered to stay, but Cassie, brave and unassuming, said she'd be fine. She had the dogs. She was safe. Matt left. Cassie was alone. What Cassie didn't know What she couldn't have known was that Brian and Torey were already inside. While the power was out, they had slipped into the basement through an unlocked door. They waited in the dark basement for nearly an hour, listening to her footsteps above them, listening to the TV. Imagine that, the patience of predators. They weren't rushing. They were savoring the production value of the moment. Then they cut the power again. This time, Cassie was truly afraid. She was alone in a massive, dark house on a hill. The silence must have been deafening. And then, the creak of the basement door. I won't describe the graphic details of what happened next out of respect for Cassie and her family, but I will tell you this. It was brutal. It was excessive. And it was exactly what they had rehearsed. They attacked her in the living room. The movie had reached its climax. Immediately after the murder, they fled. And what is the first thing they did? Did they panic? Did they cry? No. They turned on the camera. In what is perhaps the most disturbing piece of evidence in criminal history, Brian and Torey filmed their post-game commentary while driving away from the scene.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke. Stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body. It just felt like, I don't know, it felt like a movie.
They critiqued the murder like they were reviewing a scene that needed a reshoot. They complained that it didn't go exactly as planned. They were high on the adrenaline of having pulled it off. When Cassie's body was found 2 days later, the community was shattered. The police started interviewing everyone. Brian and Torey were interviewed because they had been there that night. At first, they stuck to their script. We went to the movies. We watched Pulse. But the detectives were smart. The movie times didn't line up. Their stories had cracks. Ultimately, one of them broke. He led police to the Black Canyon area where they had disposed of their evidence, the masks, the knives, and most importantly, the Sony Handycam tapes. The police didn't just find a murder weapon. They found a confession, a motive, and premeditation, all recorded by the killers themselves. They had filmed their own conviction. The trial was a formality. The tapes stripped away any defense they could have possibly conjured. There was no insanity. There was no coercion. There was just a cold, calculated desire to be famous for being evil. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were both found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The directors would spend the rest of their lives in a cage with no audience, no cameras, and no fame. They wanted to be remembered as the Scream Killers. But on this channel, we don't give them that title. We remember Cassie Jo Stoddart, a young woman with a bright future whose life was stolen by two boys who couldn't distinguish between a screenplay and a human life. The evidence was clear. The script was written, and in the eyes of the law and the world, they were rendered guilty. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more solved cases where the evidence speaks for itself, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next investigation.